So I really appreciate joining the webinar. This is really one of those moments in my career where I feel genuinely thrilled to be hosting this webinar. I will not keep you waiting for too long. I will give a very quick introduction about the story of creating this new lab. We're extremely excited about it. The lab is called Visual Intelligence and Multimedia Analytics Lab, and I will tell you the story of creating this lab in a few minutes. And then without further ado, I will introduce our distinguished speaker. But actually, before we talk about the story of the lab, we will play a game, a very quick game. If you would like to participate, open your chat window, and in a few seconds, I will put a picture from one of the popular TV shows. And for the first person who will mention type the name of the TV show correctly in the chat window, we will send a $25 Starbucks gift card to the participant, whether he or she is from USC or not. So if you'd like to participate, get ready in a few seconds, put your fingers on the keyboard and open your chat window. And in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, can you say, what is that picture from?
Nice.
Okay, we have
a winner. Yes.
Okay, that was really quick. Okay, so for the other people who don't know where that came from, this is Dr. Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang Theory in his Nobel Prize acceptance speech. And for 12 years, 12 seasons of Big Bang Theory, Sheldon was basically ridiculed by his friends because from day one in the series, pretty much every single episode for 12 years, he said, I will win a Nobel Prize. And he was ridiculed and nobody believed in him, but he actually did. And for those of you who hasn't been to, or who have been to my lab in the 6th floor in Medina del Rey, unfortunately, nobody goes to the lab that much anymore because of COVID. But for those of you who has been to my lab in Medina del Rey, you will actually find this. If my clicker works, you will find this hanging on the wall next to the whiteboard in my lab, in the student area of my lab, because I genuinely think that we have brilliant students, we have great students, and all they need is empowerment, because if they see what they want to be, they can be what they want, what they actually want to be. I really think that we have great students and the sky is the limit for our students. And that was actually, that scene from Big Bang Theory was the first reason why I started thinking about this lab a little over a year ago. And then a number of statistics that scared the hell out of me. These statistics are actually old. I intentionally put the statistics I found, or I had almost a year and a half ago. This is the number of deepfake videos that were there in at the end of 2020. And it's a massive number of deepfakes. 96% of them are pornographic in nature, and 100% of these 96% target women and shame women. And even the scarier statistics is that these numbers double every 6 months. So you do the math, these numbers are about a year and a half old. You can figure out how many deepfakes we have out there. So these numbers literally scared the hell out of me, especially that I have an 18-year-old daughter and I care about her privacy, I care about her dignity, I care about her birth-given right to be private and protected and not shamed. So these numbers scared me, especially in terms of women, and women have been targeted pretty much for the entire history of humanity. So we need to be better than this. So that was basically the second reason why I started thinking about this. And then about 2 years ago or something, this was put on Twitter. And with all due respect to, I will give everybody a second to read the tweet, but with all due respect to the author of the tweet, I disagree And a few hours later, this came, and again, with all due respect to the author of that to the tweet, I completely disagree with this, because science should not be debated and peer-reviewed on Twitter. Science is not a popularity contest. This is not how we do science. And if we actually want to make AI work, we have to, if we need to convince the public that AI works, like this tweet is basically trying to say, that we should trust an AI surgeon to operate on us, and instead of actually making this a popularity contest on Twitter, we need to actually make it work. Make it work, because we know that most people in this community know that AI is great, and I am an AI scientist myself, but at this particular moment, we have major gaps in terms of both theory and practice. We have problems with explaining AI. We have problems with adversarial robustness. We have problems with overfitting. So we have major limitations. And I'm not saying we should stop doing research in AI. All I'm saying is that social networks are not the right medium to peer review AI, let alone that most people in the computer science community know, or at least agree, that we have a broken peer review system, because it was designed in a completely different field in the mid-50s, and now we're using it for AI. It just is not working. So what we're actually doing here in these tweets, debating AI on Twitter and social networks, is another form of misinformation. Basically, this is scientific misinformation, and we should be better than this. We shouldn't actually be doing this. So misinformation is dangerous. It can be used for shaming women. It can be used it has adverse effects on national security, democracy, child safety, criminal justice, insurance fraud, and the list goes on and on and on. Danielle and I can write a list of 100 things that can go wrong because of misinformation. So these are the two major things that made me start thinking about creating this lab a little less than a year ago. As I said, empowering students and fighting misinformation. And that's exactly what the mission of the lab is. We want to empower students to make this world a better place by making information trustworthy, by making science trustworthy. And instead of debating science on social networks, we actually want to create science that people trust. We want to be able to trust information that we see, whether it is text or textual or visual information. And I am extremely grateful for the leadership of the new lab, Mohammed, Leo, and Lida, not just for buying into my vision of the lab, but making it better and crisper and stronger. And I am forever indebted for the three of them for making this idea even better than it was a little less than a year ago. More importantly, I am also very grateful to my staff. This is the staff that we have now, scientists, engineers, and assistants. And without them, I cannot be here speaking to you today. And the most important aspect of this lab, the most important dimension, is the students. These are the current students. We have a lot of students who graduated, and we are very proud of them. These are my current students. I'm very indebted and grateful to have you as my students. And if you guys think that empowering you means being soft on you, keep dreaming. It's not going to happen. Empowering you means pushing you to the limit to achieve what you can achieve, because I really believe in every single one of you. So I am very grateful. And finally, I am very grateful to my sponsors, DARPA and IARPA. They have been extremely generous with us. They have been making us create really innovative technology in the last few years. I am very grateful. And I think we have in the attendance Professor Bruce Draper. He's a DARPA PM, and he's funding me for 2 of my projects. And I'm very grateful to my funding agencies for making this happen. And we're fun. Come work with us. If you're not part of USC, we work hard, but when we play, we actually play really hard too. So come work with us. But if you decide to come work with us, don't think about leaving because we actually hold grudges. So we will not wish you luck if you want to leave us. Come work with us, and we will have fun. So if you think that our values match your values, we will be more than happy to have you as a student or a staff to be empowered and to create algorithms that actually make the world a better place. If you want to create technologies that create misinformation and deepfakes, with all due respect, we will not have matching values. So now, without a further ado, I want to introduce my very dear friend, Professor Danielle Citron. And if you had read Danielle's bio and figured out that we have the reason we became friends is our shared contempt of deepfakes, you're perfectly right. But you're only 50% correct. This is not the only reason Danielle and I became friends. The other 50% is that we are big fans of Kendall Roy in Succession. And yeah, we share this, Danielle and I share this admiration for Jeremy Strong. But enough with the jokes. Danielle actually really needs no introduction. And if I just start reading Danielle's bio, I can easily take the next 20 minutes. So I tried to summarize the most important things, and Danielle will really needs no introduction. She's a MacArthur Fellow, and for those of you who don't know, the MacArthur Fellowship is called the Genius Grant. So I think this is enough said. Danielle has testified before the US Congress and the United Kingdom House of Commons. She has a TED Talk on deepfakes that has 3 million viewers, and she was named top 50 world thinkers by Prospect magazine. So without further ado, the one and only, the brilliant Danielle Citron.
Thank you so much for having me and being an amazing colleague. And also making me laugh, I have to say. And yes, indeed, Kendall, I'm a Kendall fan because he's the ultimate sort of scrappy dog and earnest. And it turns out even more so in the actor in his real life. So I'm all for scrappy dogs and believing, and absolutely, I love the sort of theme of your lab, which is of course the believe in yourself, that we can do great things if we do it together, and the sunny optimism I appreciate so very much, and it's so terribly needed. So with that, I'm going to talk today about my newest book called The Fight for Privacy: Protecting Identity, Dignity, and Love in the Digital Age, and the theory of intimate privacy that's at the heart of the book. And I'm going to focus, I think, on some attacks on individuals, that is, individual privacy violators and invaders, rather than the sort of corporate story and government surveillance story, and talk a bit about the challenges that we face when individuals violate others' intimate privacy and some potential solutions. So, so what do I mean by the concept of intimate privacy? It's all the ways that we manage the boundaries around our intimate lives. So it concerns the privacy around that are afforded our bodies, our health, our minds. So that includes our searches and our communications, our gender, our sex and sexual orientation, and our closest relationships. And intimate privacy, it's both, the concept is both descriptive, that is the privacy that we want, that we expect, but it's also normative. It's the intimate privacy that each and every one of us deserves. So what I'm going to do is just describe a little bit about the values that animate intimate privacy, and then how individuals unfortunately violate each other's. So, why protect intimate privacy? It is, as I've argued in my scholarship and in my new book, a foundational value. There are lots of different types of privacy. So the privacy, financial privacy, the privacy of our bank ledger, so to speak, right? Our bank numbers, they impact our lives, right? But they don't have a totalizing impact. Yes, if an identity thief gets a copy, finds out our password and our bank account information, can of course empty the account. Does it have an impact on every aspect of our lives? And the answer is no. Intimate privacy does. So intimate privacy, first, let me describe the way in which it impacts our self-determination, our ability to develop our identities, right? It gives us, intimate privacy gives us the invisible space that we need with our bodies. We sort of first come to know ourselves through our bodies. And it allows us that privacy that we have with our bodies, lets us go backstage, invite some people in, leave other people out. We can figure out our identities, our gender identity, our sexual orientation. It permits us not to be completely alone, of course not. It allows us to create sort of boundaries and barriers so that who we invite in with our bodies are of our choices. And it lets us develop those personal identities. Now, Wael talked a bit about dignity. And at the heart of intimate privacy is the protection of dignity. And that, of course, you might say, well, what do you mean by the term dignity? It's a multifaceted idea. I'm invoking the term to have us think about our self-esteem and our social esteem. So being able to sort of devise the boundaries around our bodies, our sex, sexual orientation and gender, right? It helps us, having that control enables us to see ourselves as in charge of our own identities, right? It's the basis of self-esteem. Sartre wrote about in Being in Nothingness about the person who is standing naked and they experience, when viewed without permission, right, their bodies. He described that as pure shame, not because you'd be embarrassed, right, about being naked, but that you're being seen as an object, right? And we're going to talk about deepfake sex videos as well, sort of introduced to us. We'll talk about other, the posting of intimate images. That is, when you are seen, right, in your nakedness, you are often sort of reduced to a body part, right? So all that people can see of you, right, are your breasts, your genitals. You are in some sense objectified and reduced to your parts, right? And that is a feeling of profound shame, right? Not because you don't think that you're beautiful, right? But that you didn't choose to be seen in that way and you're being reduced to just that. But also dignity has a relationship with social esteem. That's our reputation and how others see us. And so when nude photos are propagated all over the internet and are in searches of our names, we know that how others see us, right, is as those body parts, right? And reduced just to that. And intimate privacy, so that's the sort of the individual self-development story and social reputation, but it is indispensable to intimacy, right? The making the decision about what we share with the people who we're closest with, like unveiling our most intimate selves and being reciprocally vulnerable is how we develop deep relationships, not just love relationships, but our closest of friendships. As we unpeel the layers, so social psychologists write about the way in which reciprocal vulnerability is incredibly important to, and letting our guards down into trusting and keeping confidential each other's, deepest secrets. And so it's intimate privacy, that is the privacy around our communications, around our interactions with those we're closest with, the sharing of our most sort of intimate selves, our most vulnerable selves, is how we develop love, right? And making those choices is indispensable to love. And intimate privacy, and I'm going to describe this in a little bit more detail as we talk about the privacy violators, but it implicates equality. That is, intimate privacy and equality are inextricable. And that's because, and at the beginning, at the outset of the introduction of the lab and talking about, whose intimate privacy is most often violated, it's women, gender and sexual minorities, non-white, so Black individuals and often Black women. And so it is often women in marginalized communities whose privacy, intimate privacy is violated. And it has a profound impact, not only on their economic opportunities, but their ability to take advantage of all of these important tools, the network tools. So let me just describe a little bit about how individuals can invade and violate each other's intimate privacy. I'm just going to give you some examples, and then that is the different types. And then I'm going to provide, I think, 2 case studies. So we can wrap then our minds around the harm. So video voyeurism. In South Korea, going to the bathroom for a woman in a public bathroom is fraught with fear because the assumption is there will be hidden cameras in the public bathrooms. So video voyeurism is the secret videotaping, right, or digitally taping and streaming people going to the restroom. Okay. Video voyeurism. Upskirt photos is sort of a species of video voyeurism, right? That is taking pictures up people's skirts and down their blouses without their permission. Sextortion. Sextortion is using people's nude images that either that you've hacked or that you've tricked them into sharing with you to extort more nude images. And sextortion, the victims of sextortion are commonly women and boys and girls. Non-consensual pornography, that is the posting or disclosure sharing of people's nude images without their permission. And we refer to it in the advocacy community at the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative as non-consensual pornography, because it's just an easy way to capture the idea, but it has nothing to do with pornography naturally, which is the premise is nudity, that's consensual, right? It's non-consensual, but we figured that the concept non-consensual intimate imagery might be just a mouthful, right? And then there's, of course, deepfake sex videos. And to this date, so the Censity did a study that last year, there were more than, and Elle is right, that it doubles every 6 months. There were more than 50,000 deepfake videos that Censity found online. 96% of them were pornographic, and nearly 100% of them were of women's faces being inserted into porn, turning individuals into porn stars without their permission. So let me give you 2 examples that I think will help illustrate the point. And I'm going to use the name Joan to describe someone who had just graduated from law school. She was in her first job, and she went on a trip to depose a client. On behalf of a client, she took a trip and she stayed in a hotel room. And when she left, when she got home, she got an email in her inbox that said from Not a Bad Guy too. And it provided links to videos, right? Those videos were posted on Pornhub and other adult sites. And the email said, if you want me to take these down and not put them up elsewhere, you'll send more nude videos. And Joan could not believe what was going on, right? She was like, how is there a video of me showering and going to the bathroom? And she recognized the hotel, right? She could see that she was just at this hotel, that it was a video of her taking a shower and going to the bathroom. Now she asked me, what do I do? And I said, you're not sending the person sextortion. You're not sending this person more nude videos. He demanded a video of her masturbating. She didn't comply. And as soon as she didn't comply, within the 24 hours that he gave her, he posted the video of her showering on countless, not only just Pornhub, but countless adult sites. And the video had her name, her full name embedded in the file, sort of file name, and also her home address and her cell phone number was included, often would accompany some of the posts on these adult sites. The person also sent the video to contacts in her LinkedIn. So on LinkedIn, she had colleagues from law school, and then colleagues from her workplace were, of course, in her LinkedIn account. And so the person presumably mined that information and then emailed the video of her showering to her colleagues at her workplace and to her law school classmates. So what sort of the aftermath and fallout for Joan was a feeling of deep and terrible insecurity that she couldn't trust, that is going to the restroom, even in her own home, certainly going in the restroom, going to work, and in her travels, that she felt totally insecure about the world around her, that she, what next shoe was going to drop, and how is this person, figure out who she was, presumably this was a hotel employee, and then figure out her email and then trace her and track her. She had a sense that her world was not within her control. She was so deeply embarrassed that her law school classmates and her colleagues at work had a video of her showering and going to the bathroom. And she said to me, like, I'll only be seen as someone urinating on the toilet, and my breasts, that she just felt like the ability to wrestle with how others saw her, she really internalized as deeply embarrassing. In order to get a sense of control over her life, she lost a tremendous amount of weight. She worked out nonstop, and it really prevented her from seeking other jobs, because she said to me, like, look, I have a job now. There is no chance that I'm getting a new job because these videos are included in searches of my name. And it took about 3 years for her to feel a sense of like security in the way that she felt about herself. She was at the time of the attack and then the posting of the videos online that remain online. She was dating a lovely person who has stayed by her, and they were planning on getting married, and they waited 2 years to get married because her sense was like she didn't feel right in the head, and there was no chance, that she explained to me, that she was going to get married in that sort of state of deep and terrible uncertainty and anxiety. So it has so what we saw was the surreptitious taping of someone, presumably by a hotel employee, the sharing of that video with her employers, her friends, posting it online, the attempt to extort her of more videos, and the sense of fear and terror that we saw. So it had impacts on her work life. It had impacts on her self-esteem, her social esteem, and her ability to flourish, right? And to be able to express herself online. She shut down her Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And it's only recently, which was 3.5 years later, that she now has a LinkedIn account again. So that's an individual privacy invader. Presumably, she didn't know the person, right? It was a hotel employee. And we know that when privacy violators, about half the times that you see video voyeurism, upskirt photos, sextortion, non-consensual pornography, deepfake sex videos, like half of the time it is a former intimate or someone you know, and the other half of the time it's not anyone you have any idea who it is. I'm going to give you another example, and I'm going to talk about a deepfake that wasn't the privacy invader, wasn't an individual whose motives we can't possibly explain or know, nor is it relevant, but the Modi government, right? So we have seen nation states target journalists with deepfake sex videos to silence them, to silence their critics, to silence dissenters. So Rana Ayub is a journalist in India who had written quite critically about the Modi regime and its human rights abuses. But the bridge too far was the Modi regime was when Ayub went on BBC to directly criticize the Modi regime's attacks, or as she argued, sort of tolerating violence against Muslims in India. And she is a Muslim Indian. The next day, she's sitting in a cafe with a friend, and her phone starts to blow up, right? She hears the ping, 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 ping of her Twitter account. And she sees in her inbox, an email from her source inside the Modi regime, which said, check your Twitter account, you'll see what I mean. And so there was a deepfake sex video of her, so linked to that email, but also strewn in her Twitter mentions, a deepfake video of her engaged in a sex act she never engaged in, and nor did she ever tape. And within 48 hours, it went viral. So it was on half of the phones in India. It spread like wildfire on sort of the public facing sort of platforms like Twitter and Facebook, but it also spread in group texts, so that it was like, there wasn't anyone she knew who hadn't seen the video. And the Modi regime is fait accompli. It accomplished what it wanted. She did not write and get published in an Indian outlet. She didn't publish anything for 6 months. She has not published since in an Indian outlet. She now writes for the Washington Post, but for 6 months, she was so terrified to go out of her house because her Twitter mentions included, she was doxxed, so included her home address where she lived with her parents, her cell phone number, her email. So there was every way to reach her. And she was terrified to leave her house. She was afraid that the posters would make good on their threats to rape and kill her. And so indeed, she was silenced. She was silenced by a state actor, didn't like her talking about the civil, the human rights abuses of the Modi regime. And so, we've seen it as a statecraft, the targeting of women and gender and sexual minorities with deepfake sex videos and other kinds of privacy invasions. And we've seen individual privacy invaders engage in this conduct. Now, so what's the challenge here, right? We're at sort of a tipping point where this sort of behavior is widespread. And the challenge that we have, and in particular in the United States, and I'm going to focus my remarks on the legal challenges in the United States that we export to other countries, and I'll explain why in a second. There are about 9,500 sites that traffic in the kind of abuse that both Rana and Joan experienced. 9,500 sites whose raison d'etre is the posting of video voyeur, so hidden cameras, upskirt photo snaps, non-consensual pornography, the bounty of sextortion, and deepfake sex videos. Now, most of those sites, where are they hosted? In the United States. Because why is that, right? We are scofflaws. And the reason is thanks to a federal law called Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which provides a legal shield for the platforms that host user-generated content. And so we, a famous non-consensual porn site was had been initially hosted in Denmark. The Danish police take it down, arrest the founders. It is now alive and well. The site sort of reforms and reformulates, sets up shop in Las Vegas. And it still remains one of the sort of most clicked on revenge porn sites that we have. So the guardians, that is the parties in the best position to minimize the damage to victims, have no incentive, no legal incentive to take down videos, non-consensual intimate imagery, because that's their business model, right? They make money off of the liking and clicking and sharing. They make money off of personal data, right? That's their business model. Some are subscription sites. So like for $19.99 a month, you can have access to certain hidden cam sites. But the big barrier and why they are often located in the United States is because of the legal shield and immunity. Now, so what about individual privacy invaders? A big problem there is there are few central problems. One is we don't have a comprehensive legal regime to address intimate privacy violations. We often sort of deal with them in a catch-can manner. So one day we're talking about deepfake sex videos. The next day we're talking about video voyeurism. And we have statutes that don't cover, as criminal statutes, the fullness of the harm. And there's no deep pocket to sue. So when individuals want to find their privacy violator and sue them, because so often they don't have money themselves to hire a lawyer, there is very little reason for a lawyer to take on their cases on a contingency basis, because there is no guarantee, there's very small chance that there will be anyone who can pay the damages, right? And so there are a number of law firms doing pro bono work that we work with at the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative, K&L Gates. But there are a small number of firms that take on cases on a pro bono basis, and we need to do a far better job for the tort system to make clear, what tort law often does is to make clear that certain behavior is wrong, that it's harmful. And the tort law can't do its work if we don't have cases that are brought. So at the heart of my book, I argue, and so I also talk about in my book, what I call spying ink, that is the endless collection of our intimate information, whether it's, femtech, so period tracking and fertility tracking apps, collect and store and share and monetize a tremendous amount of intimate information. It's also true of dating apps. It shocked Grindr users to know that all of the information that they were sharing on Grindr, including the sort of like gay subgroup that they affiliate with, and their HIV status, was being shared with marketers and analytics firms. Porn sites, you might think, there's no way they're tracking and tracing and sharing and monetizing people's search information. Well, they are, right? These computer scientists have tracked and traced and found that a significant number, I think something like over 70% of adult sites have 7 or more companies that are tracking them, including Oracle, which is a major data broker. So in my book, I talk about the ways in which intimate information is being handed over for us, collected and monetized and shared, sold to third parties like data brokers, who then are sharing it onward and selling it, and including it in dossiers that include 11,000 data points about each and every one of us. So in the heart of my book, I argue that we ought to understand intimate privacy as a civil right. You might think, okay, what do you mean by that term, a civil right? We often think of it as a protection from discrimination, and that fits, and that's incredibly important because, as we've seen, the majority of victims of intimate privacy invasions are women and minorities or marginalized individuals, and it's most costly to them, right, because of destructive stereotypes about the bodies, the naked bodies of women, gender and sexual minorities, Black individuals, and often, people that have intersecting vulnerable identities. That's true. We should understand the right to intimate privacy as a civil right to be free from structurally sort of filled out discrimination. But we also ought to understand civil rights as a basic entitlement that each and every one of us has to intimate privacy. And so we need a robust understanding of civil rights that does important work in 2 ways. One's expressive and the other is practically speaking. That is, when we start talking about an interest as a civil right, we lawmakers have to recognize that can't be bargained away for no good reason. You need a good reason. Law requires us to have a good reason if we're going to violate someone's a civil right, an entitlement that we think is essential to human flourishing and development. And it changes how we view intimate privacy and the extent to which we can invade it. It also, the practical value too, is we think of something as a civil right, we think that the guardians of civil rights, they owe us duties to be those guardians, like the caretakers of our rights. So think of schools and students, that schools are caretakers of the civil right to education. And so platforms, rather than seeing them as, scofflaws that have a legal shield from a liability, that they instead should see themselves, and law should see them as requiring a duty of care, duties to be caretakers of people's intimate information. And that's part of sort of the civil rights story, is an important one. Now, law, of course, can only do so much, right? Law is a blunt instrument, and I'm a law professor, so I have been working on legal solutions to some of these problems. We have at the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative, where I'm the vice president, over the last 4 years or 5 years, we have worked with lawmakers from states and the federal government to criminalize non-consensual pornography. And we went from having 2 states that criminalized invasions of sexual privacy to 47 states, DC and Guam. Now, the statutes aren't perfect and they're not broad, they're not comprehensive, but nonetheless, we have seen legal change on the ground. We've also helped work on and devise a federal non-consensual intimate imagery law that has bipartisan support, but Congress isn't doing much of anything these days. So we have been releasing and re-releasing and republicizing what we call the SHIELD Act, which addresses, criminalizes invasions of intimate privacy. But yet to be passed. But of course, law can do only so much. And I think partnerships with market actors are an indispensable part. We know that, some of the problem with Silicon Valley is this sort of hacker ethos, which is like you release products and services and then you deal with the harm later on, right? And when most of the folks working at these companies are male or Asian men, the majority of those engineers, they're not going to be picking up on problems that are suffered mainly by women and marginalized people from marginalized communities. And so the hacker ethic and ethos has led to a lot of harm. So I think we can talk through, hopefully you guys have some questions for me, but some of the market solutions and the kind of work that your lab is doing, that your director is doing on the authentication side and detection side to think about how we might combat deepfakes X videos is part of the broader crucial battle against misinformation that we all can have a role and part in. So I think it says 2:44. So I think I'm going to stop there in the hopes that we have questions. I'm sure that we do. About this agenda of intimate privacy as a civil right and what we might do about it.
Danielle, I'm extremely grateful. Thanks for the amazing talk. We will open it to questions. I just want to say one quick thing related to something you said. You said that these websites that host pornographic videos and revenge porn have financial incentive to actually do that. On the other hand, I had a discussion with a program manager from one of the big social networks. I don't want to say the name of the social network. And he said explicitly, quote unquote, I offered my deepfake detector to them for free because we are an academic institution. And he said, quote unquote, we are not going to use it because you haven't shown us financial incentive on why we should use it. And that's actually a very dangerous position, because I understand that from a revenge porn perspective, these websites should have quote unquote financial interest. I think social networks should have a moral imperative and moral incentive to actually combat this. And we can now open the floor for discussion, for questions. Jose Luis was asking if there was any prosecution in the hotel case.
It's going to frustrate you. Joan, when she reached out to state law enforcement, was rebuffed on the idea of just ignore it, it'll go away, pay no attention, even though it was on hundreds of sites and in searches of her name. She then turned to federal law enforcement. That's where I could be helpful. So I got in touch with the folks at DOJ who I know to see, triangulate and see how we can work with the FBI to identify her attacker. Basically, Joan was accused of making it up and for making the videos herself. And I have to say, it's deeply disappointing that she was, of course, we often blame the victim, right? This would seem absurd probably to you, right? How do you blame the victim? She goes to a hotel room. She's videotaped while she's showering, and it's shared. How could she possibly be to blame? But nonetheless, there was skepticism about the veracity of her claims. No reason to question the veracity of her claims. I can say I can attest, having gotten to know her very well over the last 4 years. There was no reason to question her veracity. And they then ultimately said it was too difficult to figure out who he was. And so despite the fact that we have pretty sophisticated computer forensics, the FBI said, can't find him, right? And so some of the biggest problem when it comes to privacy invaders, the individuals, is that law enforcement has tools, right? At the local and state level, they may have insufficient training on the technical side of things, right? But you would think at the federal level, highly sophisticated folks at the Computer Crimes Division and the Department of Justice in DC, that they would have the resources to find the individual, but nothing happened. So that's depressing. And one thing I wanted to sort of, to address your point about the major social media, social, networks. So we at the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative, I have been working with Twitter for the last, I'd say since 2009, Facebook since 2011. They both have now, in light of work that we did with, when she was the AG, Kamala Harris, the Cyber Exploitation Task Force in 2014 and 15, they ban non-consensual pornography. And so the interesting thing, right, and they now both ban what they're describing narrowly as deepfakes, right? Digitally manipulated media. The idea that they would say, I'm not surprised, right? That a dominant player said, there's no financial incentive to take down, right, videos that are salacious, that are going to be digitally manipulated, that might get likes, clicks, and shares. I'm not surprised at all. But sometimes it's even in contravention to their own policies, which shows you really where they're at, right? So I know you can't tell us, and don't worry, but it's depressing. Having worked with some of the biggest players in Silicon Valley for as long as I have, and I don't get paid for any of that work so that I can criticize them from the outside. Does that make sense? Or I've long said, don't pay me anything because I am an independent player. And being an academic allows us to do that, right? Is to be independent. And so it's depressing, but I'm not surprised.
Thanks, Danielle. So there is a couple of questions actually from a few people, and it's pretty much similar. What is the liability of the hotel in this case, and why did why didn't John sue the hotel?
Okay, so Joan is suing the hotel. Of course, the hotel. So it's so rare to have someone to sue. It's amazing, right? To have a responsible party with money, right? So Jones sues the hotel months after the initial events. They're still in litigation, and the discovery is so drawn out that even as an attorney, Joan is a very sophisticated attorney, right? She is amazed how searching and embarrassing and horrifying, like the desire to both subject her to mental exams because she's seeking emotional distress, relief for her emotional distress. The ways in which the discovery process is so embedded and it's like so invasive, and they want all of her emails that she's ever sent in the last 10 years, right? Absurdly broad claims for discovery. So look, the lawsuit's ongoing, and I watch it very closely because I'm in close touch with, we're calling her Joan. But so far, so nothing, right? And that shows you the sort of expensiveness of law and how that the drag on each and every one is law. So law is an important piece. It has a powerful expressive role. It educates us. It's our teacher law, but it's slow. And so it can be frustrating.
Thank you. We have a question from Heidi Morgan. Let me read it. Would you agree that intimate privacy can also be violated when a woman is dressed like a woman actor does an industrial video and the cameraman chooses angles that make her breast look enormous in the sweater she's wearing? The video goes viral, and even years later, she's bombarded by privy men. So she takes down all the social media, and that impact her acting career, her ability to get jobs and make living. What is the recourse?
Right. And so even when, we can think of the scenario reminds me of the down blouse photo, right? That is the manipulation of the video to emphasize that part of the body, right? It's not necessarily misinformation. It's just the emphasis, like taking that body part out of its like sort of normal frame, right? Emphasizing it. And then we reduce that person to that body part, which is in the example. And then the question was, do I think that implicates intimate privacy? And the answer is yes, it does. Implicates the ways in which we manage the boundaries around our bodies, right? In our intimate lives. And we're being reduced and embarrassed and shamed, right? And defined by, the picture of the breast in a Google search of your name, right? Unfortunately, the laws around intimate privacy that we have on the books only would cover where it's the capturing a sex act, right? Or the nipples, like very specific, granular definition of what an intimate image is, which would be the images of the breast itself or parts of the breast, right? So it may be that the example wouldn't be covered by the laws that we see, the criminal laws around non-consensual pornography. The law may be inadequate, right, to the task, but no less we see the profound values, right, that are impacted, the silencing of the person, right, the shaming and embarrassment, reducing the person to her breasts, right, the social and sense of self-esteem that's damaged. And so all the ways in which our life opportunities, right, can be shaped and affected by reducing us to our body part, right, and can so distort our opportunities, make it absolutely a question of intimate privacy. Law is a more difficult question.
Thank you. So Danielle, I have a question for you, and I think you know my position, but I will ask the questions so maybe you can share your perspective on that. So there are kind of two camps in multimedia analytics these days. One camp is like, give up, AI will be fantastic and will create really photorealistic videos and images, and there is no way you can detect them. We should just give up on the analytics part and the detection part. And there is the other camp, and I think you know my position in that, where no, we are not going to throw in the towel, and we will keep fighting, and we will keep developing algorithms to detect deep fakes. Even if they work at 50% accuracy, that's good enough, instead of just giving up completely. What's your perspective on that?
So I share your deep investment in the ability to draw lines around and detect what's true and what's false, right, in video and audio. We can't give up that endeavor. Video has a profound, it so viscerally grabs us, right? When we see video, it changes how, like, we think we're bearing witness to something, right? And its believability is all about the source, like who is featured, right? And that what matters is the source of the speech or speech act, right? That we take as valid and authentic. And it can grab us and change us, right? It's visceral. And how do we, bear witness to human rights abuses? Through photos and through videos, right? The idea that we should say we're in a post-fact environment, just assume everything is fake, right? It so deteriorates our information environment, both as a matter of our democracy, right? As a matter of just people's livelihoods. We can't give up, right? The idea that I get that too, Al, like the whole, like, you're fetishizing, photos and videos, like we're beyond it. Like we just have to assume it's all nonsense. But that's not the world in which we live. The world in which we live, there's two features. One is we decay truth. And the next piece is that we decay trust, right? So Bobby Chesney, my co-author in our work on deepfakes, we talk about the concept of the liar's dividend, which is, criminals will now look at video evidence and say, oh, that's not me. It's actual evidence of mischief and wrongdoing. And they get to invoke the liar's dividend, which is they can say, oh, don't believe your eyes and ears. Nothing, you can't believe anything these days, right? This video of me doing something horrific, oh, that's manufactured, that's a deep fake. And we saw that President Trump tried to do that with the Access Hollywood tape, right? The audio, in which initially he says, oh, it's true, I'm so sorry, I apologize to my wife, etc. Like he becomes president, and then he's like, that audio wasn't real. That wasn't me talking. That was fake. No, I don't want to live, I'm with you. I don't want to live in a post-truth environment where we just give up on reality, right? That's to give up on law. It's to give up on norms. And we should fight tooth and nail not to do that. So what do they say? I'm so with you.
Thank you. Danielle, I'm extremely grateful for your time and for being the distinguished speaker for our new lab, and I'm looking forward to working with you more. I'm grateful to everybody who attended this talk. I am very grateful, and I'm honored. I am humbled. Thank you, Danielle, and thank you everybody who attended the talk.
Thank you so much. I too am honored. So I really appreciate the chance to be with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle.
And with that, we will conclude, and I guess we'll talk later. Thanks, everyone.